Alright everybody, I'm back with the Imperialism video. Now this is going to be mainly review for your quiz tomorrow, but for later classes hopefully this is going to be more of a upfront type of video. But let's go ahead and get into it. Now imperialism is creating that empire, going beyond our borders and starting to either take over places and add them to the United States, or gaining a lot of influence in those places to where we kind of control their government without having to really own them or administer or really have to go through the pains of governing those territories. This is all about our economy. No, not all about it, but mainly about our economy, trying to get new resources and new markets. Are we being hypocritical in going and taking and creating an empire? Remember, we started out as anti-imperial, anti-colonial. We were trying to get our freedom from an empire in 1776, where our trade was controlled by England. They told us who we could and couldn't trade with. We could only produce raw goods that were then shipped to them, and then they sent finished manufactured goods to us to buy. So most of our wealth was leaving and going to them. There was no national representation. We had taxation without that representation. There was an attempt by the mother country to hold on to by force when we started to rebel, when we had the Boston Massacre, when we started Lexington and Concord. They came back very violently and fought a war to hang on. So justifications. Many of them, even though there's only 2 points here, economics are vital. We need new markets, we need new resources. We're also going to have social things with the social Darwinism, Anglo-Saxon Superiority, racism, and then the white man's burden, which is kind of based off the Anglo-Saxon Superiority idea. Political, we've got a closed frontier now. We don't have the West we can spread into, so that's kind of working on our idea of democracy. And also military, we're trying to figure out how is the best way to protect the United States. So getting into new markets. We've just come out of the the industrial society with the Gilded Age. We talked about in the past weeks how our factories are now producing so much more stuff. That's good and bad. It's good if we have people to sell to. It's bad if we've oversaturated the market, if we produce too much stuff to sell. There's nobody buying. In that case, we've spent all this money to produce things and we can't sell it, so we're losing money. So to keep the economy rolling, we need to kind of muscle and elbow our way in to new markets, to new places where we can sell stuff. They have to be mainly agricultural areas. They can't be an industrial society because they can make the stuff themselves. So if you got to find a place with lots of people in a mainly agricultural society, China and Japan are going to be the two best places for that. Alright, down here the picture at the bottom, one of the problems with our economy in 2008 was our automobile industry had not switched. They were producing too many SUVs and nobody was buying them anymore. We're also going into places for new resources. Right? We have a lot of oil, but we're still looking for new sources of oil as well. Sugar. We've got an industrial society. People are getting tired throughout that 12-hour workday. You need a cheap way to boost their energy to get through the rest of the day. So over here you got the sugar plantations. Kind of brutal, very hot work, very physical work. You got to crush these canes to get the juice and the sugars out. We're looking for rubber, especially in the Philippines. Tropical fruits are another thing. It kind of seems silly to gain the territory for tropical fruits, but if you take a look at it, these fruits are going to provide very cheap food for the United States. Apples produced domestically are more than twice the price for bananas, even with the shipping costs. That's going to be a huge thing for our food supply in these cities. So the areas we're looking as far as new resources: Cuba and Puerto Rico down in the Caribbean, Hawaii, Latin America. We're going to take over place and we're going to call them banana republics because that's primarily what we're getting from those territories, and then the Philippines as well. There's also this idea working on as social Darwinism, that the big versus the small. And it's coming from evolutionary Darwinism, big fish, small fish, that there's nothing evil about a big country taking over a small country. It's just the way the world works. I mean, there's nothing evil, it's completely natural. And the philosopher known for this is Herbert Spencer. Also going into, and I misspelled hierarchy, let's change that right quick. Alright, hierarchy of the races. So Anglo-Saxon superiority is based on this ideal that there is kind of a development of man. Right? That there is a superior race, and then there are sets of inferior races. We would call this today racism. Right? So this is actually the front inside cover, essentially, of the 1904 World's Fair. Take a look at it. It's called The Types and Development of Man. Down here we have the lower classes, all the way back to, they even put Neanderthals, the Bushmen of Africa, the Ainus, Sub-Saharan Africans, American Indians, Arabs, Chinese, Turk, all the way until we get to the most advanced being the Amero-European, so the English and Americans, Germans primarily. And taking a look at it, the person most associated with this idea is going to be a guy named Josiah Strong. This doesn't necessarily say that the Anglo-Saxons have to help out. It's just saying that they are better at colonizing than other races. We're going to divide that because later we're going to see something that actually is kind of called to arms to those Anglo-Saxons. And it is the white man's burden. The white man's burden is based off the Anglo-Saxon superiority. So if the Anglo-Saxon race is supposed to be superior, right, the other races are inferior. Now this goes into paternalism, that the Anglo-Saxons are supposed to be the father figures and protect the lesser advanced races. So they're supposed to uplift, civilize, Christianize, and make those races better in their eyes. If you take a look at this, Rudyard Kipling, and again I misspelled it, sorry about that. We've got that finished. Alright, Rudyard Kipling, he's a British Indian. He's got first-hand accounts of what this imperialism is going to be about. So he writes a poem called The White Man's Burden, which he basically tells you what the white man's burden is. Now, he's actually, in all intents and purposes, is writing this as a warning and write it almost sarcastically about this is the white man's burden. But in this, he talks about what is the white man's burden? To uplift and help people, but those people don't necessarily want your help. So this is your reward for helping them. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard, the cry of hosts ye humor, slowly toward the light. And they're going to ask you, what brought you us from slavery in our beloved Egyptian night? So they're going to ask you, why are you doing this stuff for us when we don't even want you to? So that's colloquially known as the white man's burden during the time. Uplifting the natives. Again, we see this as very racist in its ideology, that there's an advanced race and an inferior race. But back then, that's the science. It's what is in their ideals at the time. Going into the political aspects, we don't have a frontier anymore. In 1890, the Census Bureau says that the frontier is gone. We have no western frontier. We've settled all of our territory. And this is shocking for a lot of people because this has been that safety valve. Frederick Jackson Turner is going to call it the safety valve, where if you're unhappy with your life, if you're not making it in the cities, you can go somewhere and turn your life around. You could go to the west, you could get a farm, you could build yourself or pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Very individualistic, right? And that's going to support democracy because you're not going to take orders from a king. You're not going to trust a centralized authority figure. So this has been helping democracy. Having that western frontier is what made us different from the British and made us more individualistic and more able to make it on our own than the British. So Frederick Jackson Turner is concerned about that. Now, to test ourselves against new lands, to make a name for ourselves, we have to go beyond our borders. And the final thing is, we're taking over territories to protect our own borders and our shipping lanes. If we are now shipping and trading with China and Japan, the Philippines, we're going to need to protect those shipping lanes. We're going to need to protect our interests, our economic interests. So to do that, we're going to need to build up our military, specifically the Navy. The Navy is what's going to be protecting those ships. All right, Alfred Thayer Mahan is the guy we're going to associate with this, and his book is The Influence of Sea of Power Upon History. And in there he talks about the reason why we need a strong Navy and we need these bases around the world is if we get into a war without those bases, our ships are going to be like land birds, going to be like seagulls. You can fly out and go a little bit into the ocean, but then have to return back because they can't survive out there. Our ships will run out of gas, so we need refueling ports. Hawaii here is the key. It's in the exact middle of this Pacific Ocean. If we can establish a military base there, a refueling port, right, not only are we going to be able to protect our shipping lanes, but those ships won't have to carry as much coal. They can go to Hawaii and coal up on the way there, coal up when they're in Japan, along with putting the materials they need on the ship. They can come back to Hawaii and they can go back to the United States. They can carry more cargo. Also, if the United States is threatened with invasion, we wanted to prevent that invasion as far away from our borders as possible. We don't have to worry about Canada. We don't have to worry about Mexico. They're allies, and they're weaker allies in that they're not going to invade us. So we know that our northern and southern borders are secure. Our eastern and western borders are water, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. So we need that Navy to be able to defeat any invasion force out into the oceans and not along our coast. That's where we're going to stop off for here. The next video is going to be on the specific territories we take over and how we take over or gain influence in them, and the Spanish-American War.